Chapter 15. When Major Draper called, everyone came running. His inner office was his sanctum, where often vital pieces of information would make a case turn on its head to win some advantage. Hansford, who shared his office with Warwick, had just been summoned. Warwick raised an eyebrow, which Hansford chose to ignore before snatching up his jacket and heading downstairs. Reaching Draper's office, Hansford straightened his tie. The old cell door was peeling in several places, revealing the institutional paints of different years. It was opened by Hunter, Draper's confidential clerk, as he was about to exit. Hunter was a caricature of nature, a thin, wizened man with an unchanging wardrobe consisting of a cheap black suit that had been ironed one too many times and a thin polyester tie. You could hear him a mile off by the Blakeys on his shoes, designed to increase their wear. He didn't do congenial, and if he didn't like you, he wouldn't even acknowledge your existence. Draper and he had worked together for over 30 years. There was a look of the avian about Hunter, sharp, calculating and quick. Those that had incurred his wrath found their box packed on their desk. Working amongst the tightly wound had meant he always kept a loaded semi in his desk drawer. Rumour had it when off duty he perched on the back of Draper's chair until morning. Draper's baritone voice boomed out. "Come in, Hansford." "Coffee for you too, sir?" Hunter inquired of Hansford. Draper's voice barked from within. "Not for him. He doesn't have time." Draper was a bull of a man, big-boned, with shoulders broad enough to pull an ox cart. He hadn't liked wearing jackets since his university days. Now in his 70s, he always wore thick knitted cardigans over corduroy trousers with the obligatory check flannel shirt and, surprisingly, a bow tie. It gave occasional visitors the impression he had stepped into the office on his day off. Nothing could have been further from the truth. Draper spent almost all his time at his desk, poring over old case files and growling at anyone who dared to enter unbidden. He wore an unruly mane of grey-white hair almost touching his shoulders, matched with a froth of greying beard and a bombardier moustache. His saving grace were his bright eyes, shining out and twinkling at you if you were a woman, but quickly becoming hard and impenetrable to others. As much as he admired the fairer sex, he'd remained a bachelor. His manner could at once change from inscrutable and menacing to affable and welcoming. Fastidiously punctual, he arrived with nothing more about his person than his car keys, a battered felt hat, and an unlit half Corona gripped menacingly between a set of yellowed teeth. It was common knowledge if he lit a cigar by the end of the day, all was right with the world. Many decades before, in a rare moment of bonhomie, he revealed his preference for Metropolitan Explorer cigars from the legendary Nat Sherman at Fifth Avenue and 42nd Street in New York. The shipping, customs and excise he'd sulked was enough to bring a grown man to tears. It was an intolerable infringement on man's liberty to pursue his God-given right to smoke a decent cigar. Draper was an unknown quantity to all who knew him professionally, an advisor for high-ranking officials. The outset of a particularly difficult conundrum might be heralded by the sound of the singular birdsong of the robin, which would fill his office, and woe betide anyone who disturbed the sacred time. He'd made the robin's song his particular area of expertise, having spent a lifetime in the pursuit of its harmony and mathematics. As befitting a man known secretly out of earshot as the Bear, the old cells suited him perfectly. they'd been knocked through to make one large cavernous room. Situated on the ground floor, it held none of its former workplace regulatory facilities, but instead had been stripped back to its original stone walls, with an enormous iron girder running along its length, and only 2 narrow stone-framed windows, originally designed for the barrel of a cannon. The lighting was extremely poor due to the burnt-out fluorescent strips, which he'd purposefully not replaced, preferring the golden glow from various 40-watt light bulbs scattered about under a variety of eclectic lampshades. His considerable will and complete disregard for health and safety in the workplace, which he described as the communist rot to his civil rights, kept all the inane European bylaws well and truly out of his office. After all, he reminded himself, after receiving looks of disapproval, he wasn't subjecting anyone else to his working conditions. As far as he was concerned, health and safety could go hang. Central heating had never been installed in that part of the building, which suited him, as he kept a 2-bar electric fire sucking the life out of the national grid come rain or shine. He'd once been asked with a degree of trepidation if he should consider an electric radiator as less of a fire hazard, to which he had thundered in reply, "And how, pray tell, am I supposed to light my cigars?" He'd received his share of citations over the years, delighting in tearing them into spills and using them against his electric fire to light his cigars. Time and a sense of self-preservation on the part of the issuers had meant finally they'd given up. He'd kept a copy of every case he'd ever worked on, each one carefully alphabetized and stored in various filing cabinets and boxes. Peeking out of drawers and stuffed into different volumes were newspaper cuttings of relevance to the book or case in question. His office was dominated by a large, heavily carved mahogany desk with matching chair, resulting in another rumour that it had once belonged to Draper's father. The only man, apart from Hunter, who didn't tiptoe around him, and who in turn Draper sought to consult for the real problems, was Hansford. Hansford stood at the doorway. The heavy aroma of tobacco wafted through, and he felt completely at ease. It was a room a man could stretch out in and relax, and wonder why he hadn't been offered a whisky yet from Draper's Tantalus. Hansford's internal radar was scanning the ambience in the room. Standing next to Draper was a willowy man who struck him as familiar. "Well, come in, man, don't just stand there," Draper bellowed. Walking across, Hansford scrutinised the visitor. His suit was cut from the finest cloth, Italian in design, and he smelled better than most women. On his left small finger he wore a signet ring with an indistinguishable engraving. Hansford sifted through his mental archive of magazine and newspaper photos, the most likely periodicals for a visitor of his ilk to appear in. Reaching a well-worn chair, he'd identified the man standing expectantly. Smiling, he reached out his left hand to the stranger, forcing him to use his left to glance at his ring. "Signor Giuliani." "Why, yes, indeed," Giuliani replied, puzzled at his accuracy. "Very astute of you. Ah, yes, I remember. There was an article published in the paper which showed me in the background with Favremont. You understand, I choose to avoid the public gaze at all costs. One cannot live a life on this island of yours if one is constantly being recognized." He recalled how Giuliani had been photographed surreptitiously exiting the marital home of a certain dignitary under cover of darkness. Draper directed Hansford to sit down. "Signor Giuliani is here as a friend to his fellow countryman, Signor Bianchi, to look into the disappearance of Signorina Donata Bianchi, his only child." Signor Bianchi received a text message 5 days ago indicating she was in this area. Hansford's mind trawled through pertinent information he knew of Bianchi. Bianchi Wines held the largest market share in the world, with many other brands in its portfolio. The House of Bianchi remained a private company, with Signor Bianchi, a billionaire, firmly holding the reins. Bianchi's reputation was one of ruthlessness, but the disappearance of his daughter would have brought him to his knees. Donata, his only child and motherless for years, would rarely appear in the media, except occasionally at the side of her father, usually at some charitable event. Why should MI6 be interested in a missing girl? This wasn't their normal territory. Hansford questioned. 5 days ago? He noted Signor Giuliani appeared uneasy as he sauntered around the desk and sat in the chair next to him with the slightest upturn fixed on his lips. Of course, you understand we Italians prefer to look after our own. Signor Bianchi would not like to be seen as receiving preferential treatment from your government when his daughter has only been missing for so short a time. However, this is not the first occasion she has left the safety of her father's estate unchaperoned. We felt obliged to work with our own methods up until recently. Hansford thought. So far, so bullshit. Pulling out a black enamel cigarette case with gold inlay, Giuliani pressed the catch with perfectly manicured fingernails. Opening the lid, he removed an ebony cigarette with gold tipping paper that he pressed into a holder. Lighting it and inhaling deeply, he continued. Signor Bianchi feels we would be remiss in not taking advantage of the generous offer by your government, so it is now important to bring certain facts to your attention. What facts? And what has our government got to do with this? Hansford pondered. Signorina Bianchi's computer was studied to see if it held any clue to her whereabouts. Donata had been corresponding with a person unknown to us, and this person had built a level of trust with her, and in turn learned a great deal concerning the day-to-day running of the estate and the people there. We do not believe she was taken, but rather she agreed to meet this person alone and away from the security of her home. The last known correspondence from her was a text message to her father. Pulling an envelope carrying the Bianchi seal from his inside pocket, Giuliani handed it to Hansford, adding, It reads in English, Forgive me, Father, Ariana. What has Signor Bianchi made of it? Draper asked gruffly. He has made nothing of it. She is an only child and has no friends or acquaintances of this name. We have been unable to discover its meaning. What makes you think the text message came from England, or even from Donata? Hansford asked impatiently, wishing Giuliani were more forthcoming. Shortly after she was reported missing, a mobile phone bill became available which showed an international text message being sent from her phone with a UK tariff on the exact day Signor Bianchi received the message. Of course, we appreciate the message could have been sent by anyone. Giuliani became suddenly less laconic in his rendition of events, saying earnestly, I cannot underestimate the gravity of the disappearance of Donata. You may be assured her father's will in this matter is at present somewhat restrained. I do not anticipate that will be the case in a couple of days. This incident will hit the headlines in less than 3 days, not only in Italy, but across the world. Your department has agreed to work with the Italian internal minister. He addressed Hansford. Major Draper has agreed you will travel to Italy to meet with Signor Bianchi and begin your investigation there. Hansford shot a glance over to Draper, who remained impassive as Giuliani continued. We have not been able to discover much more. All we do know I have in this file. He pushed it across to Hansford. Signor Bianchi will be available to answer any questions. He feels the last known place she was seen will be a good place to start. Hansford was not overly surprised. The criminal fraternity didn't observe borders. There was a knock at the door, and Hunter entered, carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "About time," Draper muttered. Giuliani eyed the old mugs suspiciously. "You will forgive me, gentlemen, but I must take my leave of you. Preparations have been put in place for your arrival in Italy, Mr. Hansford." Signor Giuliani nodded to Draper. "I will be in touch." Turning to Hansford, he finished, "Mr. Hansford." Again he inclined his head to Draper and left. Closing the door behind Giuliani, Hunter walked over with the battered tray and began placing the mugs on Draper's desk. Hansford leaned forward to take one. "Not for you," Draper rumbled. "You've got a plane to catch, and you'll need to leave now. Make sure you take Warwick with you on your way out." Draper signalled Hunter with an almost imperceptible lift of his chin, at which Hunter returned to his desk and picked up the phone. Draper continued, "Tell Warwick to report straight back to me after your flight leaves. You've got 2 hours. Plenty of time to pack a bag, feed the cat, and leave a note for the milkman." "Sir, I don't have a cat, and they stopped delivering milk on my road years ago." "Don't nitpick with me, Hansford. Get your belongings together and get on that plane. Your tickets will be at the departure desk." Hansford walked to the door, now held open by Hunter. "Might as well go myself," Draper grumbled after him. Hansford turned and with a hint of a smile replied, "Impossible, sir. Smoking has been banned on planes since 1983. Draper slowly looked up, saying pointedly, "No one likes a smart-ass, least of all me." Hansford had the good sense to beat a hasty retreat. He was walking out as Warwick appeared and entered. Draper beckoned him forward. Warwick, close the door behind you," he instructed. Warwick stood to attention and wondered what the hell was going on. "I'll come straight to the point. Hansford is being sent to Italy. Inform him you will be calling him every day in Italy at his local time, 5 p.m, to get a detailed report." "Can't he just email me the information, sir?" "No, that's not an option. I want you to handle the reporting side of things. I don't want anything sanitized. I want all information, however mundane. Don't run it through the usual channels. You're to report directly to me, understood?" "Yes, sir." At Warwick's hesitation, he barked, "That's all." Warwick fled his office. Draper motioned Hunter to sit down. Hunter sat back in the comfy chair. Lifting the remaining coffee mug to his meagre lips, he took a long, satisfying sip before resting it back down and asking, "Something you want me to keep an eye on, sir?" Draper was ruminating, rolling his cigar between his thumb and forefinger before he stated resignedly, "It's definitely them." Hunter paled. Draper was contemplating an unprecedented move that, were it to come off badly, would certainly result in the death of Hansford and potentially both himself and Draper. "They'd have anticipated you," Hunter countered. "We can't go into this without her." "But a civilian?" "She's hardly that." "Maybe she can neutralize the situation before it escalates," Hunter offered hopefully. "She is the situation. All this," Draper waved his hands over Donata Bianchi's folder, "is a ruse to draw her out." "Are you going to tell her?" "I won't have to. Pilgrim will already know.